Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we are going to be looking at another Celestial Omni-Mech. We've got a little bit of each of them recently with the attacks on R-True and on other planets in their Rimworld Alliance. So as they're being brought here and asked to fix them or try to make them functional for everybody else to use other than the Word of Blake, we're trying to figure out the best way to make these things work. And the Malak is one that works fairly well at its weight range. Price range, it's a little bit expensive, but it's rather functional. And it's the kind of thing that shows up and causes a lot of issues because it is very functional in its primary task, which is to be a terror weapon. So let's get into it. Let's talk just a little bit about the shadow divisions of the Word of Blake. The Word of Blake military was basically split in half. Less than half here. It was more, there was the Word of Blake militias, which was the standard military. It was led by Presenter Marshal Cameron St. James, who was a odd individual and probably not the most balanced person, but still, they were roughly a standard military doing standard military things. Weird term to use as a militia because they were not really set up as a citizens military. It was the Words of Blake forces, but still. The shadow divisions were led by Presenter Apollyon and were meant to be really the scalpel of the whole affair. We've got three of the division's logos here at the bottom, 48th, 43rd, 5th, 45th, and I don't know which was actually created first because they were given random numbers more than anything else. The shadow divisions were far more okay with using nuclear, chemical, biological weapons wherever they could, either to cover their escape or to deal as much damage as possible. It is the shadow divisions that have caused a lot of facilities to have been destroyed, especially shipyards, mech factories, advanced technology depositories, things like water purification plants and factories building parts for water purification plants. A lot of them were destroyed by the shadow divisions. While the Word of Blake militia was quite special at times and they did some rather terrible things, a lot of the times they did it with a plausible deniability, hiring a whole lot of mercenaries through various sub-corporation and subgroups to make it look like they weren't the one doing the really bad things. However, the really bad reputation the Word of Blake and Blakeists have in general nowadays really comes from the shadow divisions. You had cybernetic heavy Mani Domini soldiers running around being rather scary, and they were given equipment that were to meet their skill and their devotion. Pilots of those Celestial Omni-Mechs add a whole lot of steel merged to their flesh in order to be able to pilot them properly, VDNI implants being the first of them. But on the ground, you add almost machine men running around and murdering just about whatever they could, as long as it would hurt the great houses, the clans, or whoever that was going to be the target of the wrath of the Word of Blake. And this is really where the Celestial Series Omni-Mech come into play. The Malak is the baby of the Celestial Omni-Mech series at only 30 tons. It was built by the now defunct Gibson Federated Battlemechs, since the planet is now a irradiated wasteland, and Martinson Armaments on CAF before the entire factory was relocated, let's say, by Aus Liao. It's decently fast at around 118 kilometers per hour using a 210 light engine. So, like most Celestial, it uses some of those advanced techs in order to save on weight, and this one, it doesn't save on space. You get an XL gyro and endo steel to save even more weight, but that takes up basically your entire center torso with the engine and the gyro assembly, and the endo steel is going to take quite a bit of room in what's left of your machine. You get a small cockpit, like in all the Celestial machines, with the VDNI, you do not have any real negative points to it. If you're a normal person trying to pilot it, you will find it quite cramped, but it's got advanced fire control and communication system, and a very decent C3I computer, which is useful for the rest of the Celestial series, and a lot of those Word of Blake militia machines. So when the Shadow Division units were integrated in Word of Blake militia units, they were able to share telemetry nonetheless. You have 6 tons of light ferrofibrous armor, which also takes up more room in your internals, and it gives you very decent protection on the machine. This leaves you with 9.5 tons of pod space, which is about a third of the machine's weight, which might sound a little bit tight. You have to imagine that the C3I computer is mounted in, so as far as equipment goes, you're a little bit over that 1/3 of the machine's weight threshold. 9.5 tons gives you a decent amount of leeway when trying to build new setups, and the Malak is generally set up as a terror weapon in most of its configuration. Your primary Invictus configuration, it does that by using a flamer and Inferno-loaded 2-tube SRM launcher, the ammo being in case bin. You don't have to always put Infernos in it, but it's what it was most commonly used as. For long-range support, you have a light PPC, which gives you a okay firepower, and an ER medium laser on top of the head, which means that, well, while you have a light engine, you're still a little bit of a zombie here. Even if you get beat up quite a bit, you're still going to have that ER medium laser. Like most of the Invictus configurations you're going to see for the Word of Blake, the arm also mounts a retractable blade in order to get into fast and nasty melee attacks. Hunting down infantry is a rough job, but it's a job light mechs are usually really good at with their speed and their mobility. The Dominus configuration does that with a pair of flamers in the torso, combined with 6 light machine guns in a set of 2 arrays. The ammo for the machine guns are set up in case bins. Against harder targets, you get a pair of ER medium lasers, which is sufficient against light armor and to dissuade light mechs from following you. Finally, you get an extra ER small laser as a backup. I probably would have moved things around a little bit in order to put an active probe on there. Active probes are really, well, I'd almost say essential when trying to hunt down infantry because it'll allow you to find said infantry really well. Light machine guns have a little bit of a longer range than regular machine guns, even though they don't shoot as hard, let's say. But against regular infantry, they still do the job really, well. The next configuration is a little bit more of a zombie once again, even though, well, still, with a light gyro and a light engine, once you start getting damaged, things are going to go pretty bad. What makes it a little bit of a zombie is the fact that the pilot sits on a snub-nosed PPC in the Infernus configuration, giving you a very good short-range punch. Each arm carries an ER medium laser for added firepower, which is pretty decent, but you're going to start running a little bit hot. Finally, to disrupt enemy electronics or to protect your own C3I network, which is very important in these kinds of situations, you get a Guardian ECM. Unless your opponent using an Angel ECM, your Guardian ECM should be enough to prevent other Guardian ECMs from causing issues. C3I networks are kind of fragile, so you have to be careful with them. If the enemy knows you're using one and they bring their own electronic warfare equipment, things can go fairly bad. So having a lot of mechs with Guardian ECM on your own side is not going to be a bad idea either. With its decent top speed, the Malak can make a very decent scout. When you combine it with the Communist kit, it becomes actually a really great scout. Your main equipment is composed of a Beagle active probe and a Guardian ECM. We already had that talk about the ECM, the Beagle probe, so you kind of understand why it's there. And that's backed with a tag targeting laser in order to guide artillery missiles, which were fairly common in the Word of Blake, and especially the Shadow Divisions, and semi-guided LRMs, which are not as common. Ausmeric were the big fans of them, and Ausmeric being basically the Word of Blake's third backup, it would mean that they would have had them as well. For actual weapons, you get 2 ER medium laser and a trio of ER small lasers tied to a targeting computer, which is decent enough. To prevent ambushes from battle armor, you also carried a single B-pod, which is basically a canister round made to shoot at things trying to climb on you. This makes it a, once again, very decent scout that's going to be able to be used in a variety of situations, or as an artillery spotter, which is quite important in this day and age. The Luminos configuration is meant to be a sniper/mid-range skirmisher with an all-energy loadout. You get a pair of light PPCs giving you decent range, and it's combined with a pair of ER medium lasers when things get a little bit closer or in your minimum range. When things get even closer, you get 3 ER small lasers. I would have put, once again, a Guardian ECM or a Beagle Active Probe instead of those ER small laser, but that's just me. Eminus is also a sniper, but this time it's a little bit more specialized, using a Thunderbolt 5 launcher and a light PPC. You're going to have quite a bit of a minimum range on both of those weapons, and the Thunderbolt 5 launcher has a very limited ammo feed. Once things get closer, you still get a pair of medium lasers. I kind of understand the design choices, especially once you look at all of the different Celestials. All the Eminus have that Thunderbolt launcher, but this one's a little bit light to carry this type of weapon, and a Thunderbolt 5 is not going to make a huge difference. I'd rather go with a standard LRM 5 instead, or maybe even an SRM 6 to give you more punch. The Thunderbolt 5 is just not worth it, in my opinion. A variant first seen in 3075, the Caelestis uses an experimental, at the time, PPC capacitor on a larger ER PPC to give it the same punch as a clan ER PPC with a little bit, well, a decent amount more EAT. For when people get a little bit closer, you add a trio of ER small lasers. Load this up with clan tech and you could probably add additional EAT sinks. You'd get more power out of your PPC. There's quite a few things that I would have done differently. Another thing I would have done differently, since you have the PPC capacitors and light PPCs, go with light PPCs with capacitors. Those are actually really nice if you've got a pair of them. You basically have a pair of regular PPCs for a little bit of a different weight. Really look into the options here for what you can do as far as the weight goes. There is a specific Malak configuration which was used by Adept Tomataki from the Opacus Venatori, which is actually quite special, at least in my opinion. The configuration uses a pair of medium variable speed pulse lasers, one in each arm and an ER small laser in the head. In order to bring all of those weapons into range, it added a supercharger, giving you a top speed of about 150 kilometers per hour. It's supposed to be unique, but we keep seeing it pop up. I have a feeling that she was the first one to pilot that darn thing, and they didn't want to have an official configuration for it, but the design itself started spreading throughout the entire Word of Blake militias and Word of Blake Mani Domini forces, and whenever a Malak was around and you add those bits, they were put in. You get a fantastic short-range firepower on this one, and with that kind of speed, you're able to bring it to bear. Would I have gone with a pair of medium pulse laser in each arm instead of the medium variable speed pulse lasers? I always have a bit of an issue with the VSPs. I'm really not a fan of them, but it's probably because I've been playing with clan tech far more than I've been playing with anything else. So your mileage may vary. I think it's quite functional, and it's common enough, or the design itself, the design specs are common enough that you're going to be able to build that one if need be. I do think the Malak is a very decent mech in its range, even though the price and electronics on it make it a little bit more difficult to manage. While I understand it comes built in with that C3I computer, more modern refit would probably want to remove it and use that space for more pods or even more armor, depending on what you need. Or even there, remove the C3I from the core system and just use that 2.5 tons to put back a C3I when required, and use the rest of the mech as normal. Going into the innards of a Malak is quite rare. I enjoyed the opportunity to do that recently. And if you're able to get your hands on one, it's a fun thing to use, at least for the time it's going to be able to stick around, because, I mean, it remains a light mech, so it's going to get busted quite quickly. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.